Actually, what's being required now is a real nuanced persona, which in one sense is really freeing, but can also be a bit scary. What do you think the tension is there, especially when we then think about personal identity and connected to vocal identity?
Sound check. Check one, check two.
So it's this is what's tricky with this too, is that everybody is in a different phase of their artistry. So, if you've never sung before, you probably have very little sense of identity and you just want to get the biomechanics working. You want to be able to make sound. Whereas the artist who's been singing for 5 years is starting to gain a better sense of what they like, what they don't like, who they want to be. And so there's definitely a spectrum here to think about, and it's not just a cookie cutter that's across the board for everybody. But the tradition had been, like you said, it was to transform somebody's identity, to say, oh, you want to be a singer? Well, this is what a singer does. And we transformed the person into a singer. But now we have to embrace the identity of the person who's standing in front of us and start to figure out how that integrates into our work. And so that's like understanding the person's history, because our history is who we are. And that history comes into, gender identity, ethnic identity, cultural identity, racial identity, and then the life experiences that you had around all of those things. So what kind of music was played in your house? What kind of music did you, go attend as you were coming up and growing up? What were your first influences? What do you do now? Who's your friend group? What kind of music do you like to go attend performances of? What function does that music serve in your life? Is music an emotional release for you? Is it a way to connect with others? Is it the way that you form friendships and peer groups is around this music? And so all of these things make a big difference. And then we have to consider how those are going to impact the way that we develop your technique. So if you came from a quiet home, it's highly likely that you're probably going to present with a quieter voice. Whereas if you came from an extroverted home where everything's loud all the time, you're more likely to have more of an extroverted big voice. And when you start to, search for who this person is that's in front of you that you're working with, you want to take that into consideration, because if they are more of the, quiet introverted type, then the vocal sounds that they're drawn towards may be those quieter, more intimate sounds. And if you try to push them too quickly towards big, belty, loud, extroverted vocal sounds, it doesn't really resonate with them, and it's going to slow down your progress.
Yeah.
So all of these things are intimately linked together. But we all see the world through our own lens. And you can see this, it's most clear in social issues and political issues, where you see people's vast, diverse lenses that they see the world through. As an artist, you have certain viewpoints that you then help communicate through your music. So if you are someone who's always struggled to find a meaningful, deep connection of love, the kind of songs that you're drawn to are going to be songs that deal with those topics. And when you tell those stories, you're sharing the way that you view love through the lens that you see it. And that lens is going to be different than the lens that somebody else sees love. And that's what makes you connect with certain people in your audience. So I think it's as simple as just saying that we tell stories, or we, set a mood or communicate an emotion, or even just live in the groove of the world, way that we see the world. And when we do that, we then help other people maybe see the world in a different light.
Yeah.
And to me, that's artistry. Artistry is helping others see the world in a different light than they would normally see on their own.
I think one of the challenges that I hear many, and this is not just beginner singers, but students that have been workshopping their voice for quite some time, they've been on this pathway of vocal development for quite some time, will still express this challenge of finding their own voice in with the need to want to develop their artistry. I wonder whether you might just talk to that idea of finding one's own voice. People will often will often express, but I feel like I'm always imitating my favorite singer. I sound like XYZ, but I want to find my own voice. And I think it comes from this deep desire to be able to freely express themselves through their art. What are some practical tips that we can give singers who are looking to establish and develop and find their own voice?
Well, I think that it's expanding your horizons and listening to many, many different artists. So if you're afraid that you're sounding like a specific artist, you may not be listening to enough different types of music. And so the ideal is that you're listening to dozens and dozens of artists and absorbing all those influences. So let's say you mainly sing, heavy metal music. Well, go back and listen to rock and roll from the 50s. And see what those artists were doing and just absorb the sound. Go back and listen to some of the original blues artists and absorb the sound. Then go to something completely different. Maybe go over and listen to hip hop and look at what the hip hop artists are doing and absorb those influences. And along the way, instead of focusing on being very similar to a certain group of artists, take little bits and pieces from the way that different people do things. You might really like the rhythmic delivery and the voice of this one artist that you listen to, but you might like the way that this other artist incorporates growls that's different than the way that you usually incorporate growls. And if you then go and work on a song by making it more rhythmic like the first artist you've been listening to with the different kind of growls that you haven't been using, all of a sudden you're integrating that with what you were already doing, and you're not an imitation of either, but rather an amalgamation of those two plus what you had already been doing. And so if you are an artist who's out there trying to find your own signature sound, do this work. In fact, what I like to have a lot of my performers do is find one single song and find 5 different people that have covered that song and listen to the way that those other people have brought that song to life.
Yeah.
And then Steal Like an Artist. There's a great book by Austin Kleon. If you don't know it, it's called Steal Like an Artist. And what you're going to do is say, I like they did this and they did that. I'm going to mix all that together and I'm going to make it my own. And then that way, you're not imitating any one singular person, but rather you are bringing together influences who are helping you formulate and craft your own unique interpretation of the song. Oh, you got it right there. And what I love is it helps performers realize that this is literally the process that artists have been going through for centuries. Yeah. It's full of quotes from artists that you will recognize who talk about the influences on them and the things that they stole along the way to help them become their authentic self.
I think because one of the challenges in this discussion space is there can be this great mystery, that develops over the artist. And you're quite right. A book like this just really removes that mystery. I mean, in one sense, we never remove mystery from art, but certainly as a skill that all of us can develop and be intentional about that, skill development. It's a great text.
One thing that's interesting that you mentioned is that how art can sometimes be put up on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to understand is that comes from like the late 1800s, the early 1900s, when the upper class was really starting to explode worldwide.
Yes.
And the upper class was trying to put an emphasis on the arts and saying that the arts were from God, and they were trying to lift up other people from other cultures who are non-European, as they believed they needed to lift them up and change them. And they were also trying to do the same thing for what they saw as the lower class. And they made art this high, holy thing. Whereas if we just focus simply on helping other people see the world a little bit differently, that is the most simplistic definition of art. Showing someone the way to look at the world through your eyes. And so I would just challenge anybody who's struggling with what does it mean to be an artist? It means telling a story the way that you want to tell it to help other people see things the way that you see them.
Yeah.
And if you start there, you can build out from that over the long run. But don't try to be everything. Just try to be that. Be you.